Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Insider. This week, I'm delighted to be joined by Ana Jakimovska. Hello, Ana.
Hi there.
So first things first, did I manage to pronounce the surname correctly?
Spotless, without any practice as well.
No, without any practice. Before, yeah, absolutely straight in. Ana, would you like to start off by giving the listeners a quick introduction?
Yes, of course. So firstly, thanks so much for the invite. I always enjoy talking about tech-related sort of things happening, especially in the pandemic. So I do appreciate, having the opportunity to chat.
Thank you.
Ana, I am currently Chief Product and Technology Officer at a startup called Culture Trip. We are basically a tech-enabled travel startup with content at its core. I can explain what that means a little bit later. And I've been in this role for I've been at the company for about 2 years and in this role for about 6-7 months. And before that, I have probably 15 years, a bit more experience in publishing and broadcasting in various product roles, such as The Guardian. I was 2 years, prior to Culture Trip, I was 2 years director of product at The Guardian. Prior to that, I was at head of product for Sky News, then ITV, BBC, Channel 4, in various product roles. And I also have a PhD in artificial intelligence. So a big part of kind of the role within Culture at the moment is also utilizing and supporting the data science team in enabling machine learning to provide the best user experience.
Yeah, amazing. It's interesting. Not too long ago, I did a blog on the background of CTOs and how typically, I guess my background of CTOs would have come from an engineering perspective that have worked their way up in engineering, then become an architect, tech leader, then a CTO. But it is very common to have CTOs who've come from a different background. Obviously, you've got a technical from the degree within artificial intelligence, but more from a kind of product perspective. But obviously, having good technical guys that you've always led on, kind of building up. So, no, really interesting. How you say it's a startup? How big's Culture Trip now?
Yeah, so just on the previous point, I actually have a computer science degree, and I was an engineer for the first couple of years of my career, a bad one, I must add.
What language?
At that time it was Delphi and Fortran. It was a very, very long time ago.
Yeah.
And also a kind of SQL Server as a relational database that was attached. It was kind of groundbreaking at the time. I did enjoy it, but I realized I enjoy much more the strategic and stakeholder engagement side of things. And I realized I'll always kind of be on the mediocre side of an engineer, but probably I can kind of provide more value in a more strategic roles and on the product side. So just acknowledging talent.
Yeah.
Talent is one of the big things that I think we need to do. Culture Trip at the moment is, I think, around 130 people. We are spread across 3 territories. So I look after all of tech, engineering, data science, SEO, design and product. And our squads, we work in a squad model. We use OKRs. It's split between Tel Aviv and London. And we have another office in New York, which is predominantly around our media sales business and content. So I don't know what the definition of startup is. I think it varies, right?
Yeah, there's a company that I'm working at the moment that are 7 years old and they still say startup. There's different reasons, I guess, that that people would look at and classify as a startup. It's not necessarily down to headcount, right? So it makes a lot of sense. So obviously the Insider is all about speaking to technical leaders and understanding challenges that they're facing at the moment and moving forward. I've maybe got a few. You start talking about different territories and especially in the pandemic, I'm sure there's challenges that come up there. But what's been maybe the kind of biggest challenge that maybe you faced more recently?
Great question. I think I would probably say three main challenges. I mean, the first one, that we are in travel during the pandemic, obviously would be one of the biggest ones. And to a certain extent, we have been affected, but I guess my definition of startup is we still reliant on external funding. So that's kind of how I cast startup.
Sure.
And in a way, the pandemic has prevented us from learning at the scale that we were used to learning when there was a travel demand, and improving the product, because obviously there's been multiple sort of closures across the inventory that we're selling. So it was almost impossible to kind of learn and test and see how to improve the product. So that would be one big challenge to overcome, not just for our company, but in travel in particular.
Yeah.
And what that has kind of meant is we needed to be much more responsive to the external content from multiple areas, from what are the type of travel that we're selling, in what territory, and how the rules tend to change. So we've always been fairly agile in our approach in general, but we do work with OKRs on a quarterly basis, because I just don't think there's any value in kind of doing anything less or more for businesses like ours. But this has made us kind of almost look into what would be the next layer of agility added to quick respond to the market conditions. And that has actually worked fairly well in specific areas where we created a small squad, kind of ad hoc squad, to respond to pandemic announcements. And it was a small multi-skilled squad, which would have an engineer, a content person, a marketing person, and they knew that their kind of time to market or their pivot would come almost on a weekly or daily basis. And whilst the expectation is set, it actually worked really well, because we didn't want to disrupt the rest of the business that had much, let's say, more longer term sort of objectives and key results to meet.
It's a particular kind of engineer that you need in that scenario, because over the years I've done a lot of work in online, in the online world, in online travel, actually, lots of online travel. But I guess if I related to things within, I don't know, something like online betting and gaming, if a website's down, the companies can't make any money. So you need people who are very reactive as well as kind of proactive. You know, they're firefighters. And it's true, I can imagine that your environment must need those kind of people who can, like I say, quickly react to, you know, it's not just the change in our countries, it's the change in all the other countries. Especially when you work in travel, it must be so difficult to kind of pin that down. You said obviously the business is about 130 people, and what's the size of the engineering team that you look after?
It's about half, a little bit more than half.
Yeah, it's a big engineering team. And I guess the challenge of kind of how have you managed to look after such a vast team? And are they my second part of the question, are they spread out? Are they obviously in different territories as well?
Yes, so they're half of them are in Tel Aviv and half of them are in London. I think looking after our staff has a couple of aspects, as we've discussed and we implement various policies from a leadership point of view. One, the pandemic has been very challenging, and our workforce is a millennial workforce. And in London, these are people who don't normally live in London, rent, small spaces at premium to have access to transport or entertainment or restaurants around the areas where they live. And I think these are, some of them fairly junior and new to this way of living. So we found that as a company that has this profile of our staff, we needed to provide extra support in terms of managing with the notion of being away from your family in a confined space, and sometimes with sort of people that you share the flats and houses with that might go through the similar sort of struggles. So we do have quite I would say fairly mature approach to mental well-being, and our people team have been brilliant at enabling various meetups and virtual coffees, and I forgot the name of this initiative where you sort of randomly meet somebody to have a chat with them, and various sort of, I guess, hosting of various non-work related, still virtual forums to discuss various things. We have networks which are kind of for supporting new parents, or parents that had to kind of endure the pandemic with 3 kids and no childcare.
Yeah.
And we've put a lot of flexibility in place to work kind of alongside their personal circumstances.
Great, yeah.
So various sort of groups and verticals where people could get advice and share experiences in particular sort of area, which is very kind of prevalent to the lifestyle and the life that they have.
Yeah, it's I think that's been the biggest challenge, because when you've got a large team that you're looking after, there's so many different circumstances in terms of where people live and their personal situation. Are they doing homeschooling? And my business partner and I are very different. I don't have any. Well, I have a dog that we've spoken about. Maybe we'll bring up, but he has 3 little girls, and his working day was completely different to mine, off because of homeschooling. But weirdly, now moving forward, he's almost it's like a sleep pattern. He's kind of like fallen into this routine, even though the kids are back to school now, where he'll end up doing some work later in the evening once they've gone to bed, but it suits his kind of lifestyle. And I think that's a flexibility. We talk a lot about flexibility moving forward of kind of home or in the office, but I think there's a lot of flexibility now in terms of working days in general. I think it's like it's work the same in engineering.
Absolutely, and that flexibility has resulted in actually formalizing, which we call now feel good flexi scheme, and that is kind of formalized in a almost fully flexible ability to be fully flexible in your work, including hours and the days in the office that an individual chooses to kind of come or not, with obviously the collaboration element and building relationship element baked into it. So we kind of leaving solely to as particular squads or sort of leaders or managers to discuss what are the best ways to continue kind of and to grow the relationships of people who have started during the pandemic in specific squads, to ensure that then it's not this sort of virtual world only, but equally to be very receptive to folks who maybe moved out of London and out of our office, to enable them to kind of work and contribute remotely. And that scheme has kind of proved to be very popular. With retention of current employees, but equally we've had quite a lot of recruitment in the past 4 or 5 months with attracting new talent. And just to kind of add, so it's all about sort of the flexibility and the well-being in the workplace. The other thing that I think has helped a lot was over communicating on a leadership level, and that was around the strategy. That was around any pivots that we might have taken, around the impact of the pandemic to the business, around ways of working. So we have established sort of fairly rigorous communication regime for everybody, and we've kept the kind of Slack doors open, for lack of a better word, for anybody who would want to get in touch. And that in a super transparent way, that transparency I think has helped, but equally just keep reinforcing the strategy and the messaging helped as well.
Yeah, I think it's vitally important for setup of teams now. It's really interesting that you're talking about how it's almost like a down to the kind of individual. If you've got a good engineer and they're right culturally for your business, but their personal circumstance in terms of if they're going to come into the office or however it's going to work moving forward, and the collaboration so important. And I think I remember last summer, again, I touched a lot on collaboration. It took a bit of time for everyone to get their head around the online interviews, but managed to do that quite quickly. Then it was onboarding online, which was really, really hard. And then it was suddenly like collaboration. It was like kind of like back end of last summer. It was like, how's everyone collaborating? How is everyone working together? And I think that you're right. Now everyone's kind of set in squads where it's best suited for their profile, because a good engineer in your team, obviously with the right skill set, is a good engineer, but you've got to make sure it kind of fits the rest of the team. It's difficult if somebody wants to come into an office and somebody doesn't want to come into an office. So it's a challenge that lots of technical leads are going to be facing right now. But I feel as though you've got your ducks in a row. It's almost like planning and getting the right kind of people together early on. And that's an interesting one in terms of a back to work strategy. Have you guys actually kind of thought about, is your office open now? Are you planning on a certain percentage allowed in? What's the thoughts there?
Yeah, so our office in Tel Aviv is open, and I think that so each country would have a specific rules on level of occupancy and specific sort of rules. The Tel Aviv office is open, and people can sign up, and then they can.
Well, they did fantastic, didn't they? In Israel, they were like the speediest to get vaccinated, weren't they?
They are incredible. I think they've done it fantastic. But equally, I've never in my kind of entire career of leadership, I've never had to wake up in the morning when there was unrest at Tel Aviv to get a tally of whether everything's well and alive, and that is something that on top of the pandemic I found extremely sort of challenging, I guess, from an emotional point of view.
Yeah, absolutely.
To kind of have to deal with, and equally on top of the pandemic to provide support for individuals there who, have been kind of going through obviously a difficult time on both sides. I mean, this is more about my experience working with the Tel Aviv office. So in terms of, to answer your question, back to kind of work, the London office is still closed. We're expecting for announcement from the government to see when we can open. But the idea is exactly that. We believe in decentralized but aligned type of governance, which means each squad individually can work any hours they want and any methodology they want, as long as it's aligned to the kind of architecture that we have, the principles of work, and availability to kind of cross collaborate when it's needed. In that sort of sense, we are advising and recommending to have a squad 1 day per week or 1 day fortnightly when the entire squad comes in, and that might be doing a specific agile ceremony such as sprint planning or retro.
Yeah.
And when everybody's there and they can kind of have those relationships in person, the relationships and the collaboration in person, and then the rest of it can be fairly flexible. The reason I think we were a little bit more advanced in that sort of way, because we so obviously in London and Tel Aviv, it was a little bit challenging when we would have leadership meetings or collaboration meetings and everybody in London is in the same office and 2 people in Tel Aviv are on VC. And the dynamics of the meeting are kind of obviously skewed. We were very conscious of it, but it's very difficult once you have sort of lively discussions to not fall back into the pattern that the people in the room are probably kind of, the attention is more on the people in the room, and the people kind of that are virtually, you tend to sometimes kind of not give them the attention that they need. And as an example, my kind of head of engineering at that time in Tel Aviv just like me to say, when you're making that point, you're actually turning your back on the camera so I cannot see anybody else. And those type of things that you're not aware, and you just go, oh, right, I need to take that into account, because obviously it's a minor thing, but it does kind of, it makes the meeting harder to follow. So in that sort of respect, what are the rules kind of for engagement within the squad is, it makes sense for everybody to be there. You either are or online, or kind of you try and do all in the office if possible. Other than that, of course, the hybrid model will work, but without sort of having established those 2 guidelines, it can be a little bit trickier.
Yeah, very much so. And I think it's the things that other technical leaders said to me. You can have there's one company a company called Form 3 who a guy called Kevin who I interviewed on the pod, and they've been a fully remote business for a couple of years now. So when this came, it was okay for them, but they have to really strictly keep their kind of collaboration model, because if you and I are working in the office in London and we have, obviously we have Tel Aviv, you and I might pop out to get a coffee and I might run something past you going down the stairs and you think that's a good idea. And then we maybe decide to do it, but hang on, we have to go back and we have to virtually communicate this to and this idea that I had over a coffee with Tel Aviv, because that's how these things come up when you're more relaxed and chilled. You're having a beer in the pub after work or something like that, and that's when it's quite difficult to make sure that collaboration's kept together. And they've done quite well, but that's because they're all over. They have people individually working in different countries. If it's separate offices, it's probably a lot easier, to be honest with you. I sort of seen something on LinkedIn this week actually regards kind of going back to office and how most of my clients are I guess are open now. Most of them seem to be at about 20% capacity of people who want to come in, especially if you're living by yourself in a flat in London. Most people do want to get into an office. But have you seen this thing on LinkedIn where they've got the wristbands? So it's like red wristband if you like stay away from me, green wristband for her. And I just think it's great. I think I'm really interested in, anyone listens to this, like put some comments in to see kind of how they're planning to bring the staff back in a safe environment where everyone's quite happy. But no, it's quite an interesting time. Listen, I don't want to take up any more of your time. Thank you so much for coming on board and having a chat with me. Kind of a bit more personal news. You've got a new addition to the family recently, haven't you?
I do. Well, listen, firstly, thanks for inviting me. We could for hours. I really enjoy the exchange, and I also listened to your podcast before, so they're super useful for people like me. So keep doing them.
Thank you very much.
And then yes, the other topic that we can talk endlessly about is that we both have little. I have a puppy. Yours is a bit is a bit, oh, look at that.
I'm going to bring him up. So if anyone's watching on YouTube, which I don't get enough watches on YouTube, so this maybe I can force some people to go onto YouTube now. It's normally over the podcast, but yeah, we both got Daxi. So I feel like a proud father now. He's sitting on my lap. I've just woken up. He's yawning, but yeah, he's been. So my Daxi Wilfred, I think, is about 16 months old now. So I'm here on hand for any Daxi advice as Bailey grows up.
Bailey's like we said, he's a very sort of mischievous puppy at the moment. And he does that, so I do need advice, because I realize I'm not doing all the things properly. One thing that has happened during the pandemic is a lot of people in culture got dogs, so they're kind of 6 months ahead of me, and we have a Slack channel. It's called Pandemic Puppy Blues. Or misbehaved puppies. We don't take anybody who has a well-behaved puppy.
Yeah, brilliant. No, well, yeah, I was about to say you'll be at the nipping stage. You've got another 2 or 3 months of the finger chewing stage, I'd imagine, and then they'll start to come out of that. But no, like I say, we could talk Daxis and tech all day, but I know you're very busy. So thank you very, very much for coming on. Is it okay if anybody wants to reach out just to kind of connect on LinkedIn with you?
Oh, more than welcome. Yes, I would love to. Absolutely. If they find this useful, I'm more than happy to kind of share more things.
Yeah, perfect. I think that, like I said, there's a lot of clients that I work with in the travel sector, and I have done over the years, and people will be listening to this, and I think there's a lot of similar challenges that people have faced. But listen, fingers crossed, we're moving in the right direction. I'm desperate to get away, so I'm sure a lot of people will be looking at the business and seeing opportunities there, obviously, as well through my network. So.
Yes, I think that's the kind of silver lining, that apparently travel always bounces back with revenge. And
oh yeah,
the same. There's a pent-up demand of people trying to kind of explore other countries and have other experiences. And I think in culture will be there to
yeah. There's a lot of holiday that's been stored up, I'd imagine. So people would be desperate to get away.
Yes.
Thank you very much, Anna. I look forward to speaking to you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.